Welcome to the World United. Welcome to the World United.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Stephen Dynako, and it is my pleasure and honor to be with you delivering this talk called Conscious Evolution as a Field of Study and Practice. I'm the founder of an educational platform called Social Chrysalis, the purpose of which is to teach the skills of conscious evolution and to bring conscious evolution to the mainstream. It's certainly about time for that to happen, given what's going on in the world in recent years. And the inspiration for the platform came from my work with Barbara Marx Hubbard. I had the honor of being involved with Barbara to co-create the last two live programs of her life. The last one called the Evolutionary Ambassador Academy, and we were approaching that program as a way to prepare the next cohort of evolutionaries to do the work of conscious evolution in the world. This talk I purposely titled Conscious Evolution as a Field of Study and Practice, because originally it was going to be conscious evolution as a field of study. And to me that doesn't feel complete, because study, discussion, thought alone are just like one hand clapping. And these have no productive use unless they are supported by action. And that's where practice comes in. So conscious evolution is a field of study and of practice, and then we have action. So how do we begin our study? Let's start with that. And I would say the quickest way to do that would be simply to pick up Barbara Marx Hubbard's book, Conscious Evolution. And she's done a lot of the work for you here. She's devoted her life to this topic. You could say, is the creator of the field of conscious evolution. She was really wanting to take a program in conscious evolution back when she was an undergraduate and there was no such thing. So she actually had to go out and invent it. So you can read about it in the book. That's the easy way to do it. And it certainly will take you a long way. And then next, I would say, is it relates to making the study of conscious evolution more personal to you. Let's start with a basic principle of conscious evolution, that we are all encoded with what Barbara called the evolutionary impulse. And it's the reason why we're here. It's the reason why, whether you realize it or not, you get up every morning, you do the work you do. It's the reason why you have desires, that you have dreams and visions, and you make intentions. Awareness of that basic conscious evolution principle, that we are all encoded with the evolutionary impulse, awareness of that leads to what I would call a focused curiosity. So when you become aware of the evolutionary impulse and you feel it, you understand yourself as a cast member in this great cosmic play of evolution in which we all have our roles. And you also understand that we evolve. Really, we thrive by choice rather than by chance. So conscious evolution, it literally means to evolve by choice. And by evolving, we mean that all of humanity, all of life on Earth, the planet, is always thriving, is continuing to thrive, and it's not devolving. We're not regressing back to old, tired, worn-out states of being that don't work anymore. So the evolutionary impulse. And then the other way to study is through our own life's template. And this template is determined by events, an event or events that nudge or could shove us along on the journey. And to give you an example of our life's template, let me just use Barbara's story. It starts literally, the way that Barbara started along the path of conscious evolution as a field of study, it starts literally with an earth-shattering event. And it was the atomic bombs being dropped on Japan in World War II. And Barbara had the good fortune a few years after that to actually visit President Eisenhower in the Oval Office. And she asked him, you know, Mr. President, what is the meaning of our newfound technological power, that is, splitting the atom, that's good. What is the meaning of our power that is good? And President Eisenhower was taken aback by the question, the story goes, and he answered, he says, I don't know. And that just really astounded Barbara that he couldn't answer that question. And this is what set her on the course to study the process of evolution and how we, as the self-aware species, intelligent as we are, we could make the choice to evolve or devolve. We can use our power for good and for being generative, or for destruction, as was proven there in World War II. So she sets out, and in her own study, this is Barbara's life template. On her own study, she reaches out to people like Buckminster Fuller, architect, a systems theorist, an author, a designer, an inventor, and a futurist. And ultimately, he became Barbara's mentor. And she studied his work. She reached out to Jonas Salk, who was developer of one of the first successful polio vaccines. She reached out to, and she studied the work of Abraham Maslow. And Maslow is a psychologist who created, as we all are familiar with, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And Maslow was unique as a psychologist because he was interested in mental wellness over mental illness, because everybody up until then, for the most part, was studying, mental illness, like what's wrong with people. And Maslow was shifting the paradigm. He wanted to study what was right with people and help that to inform how we could all evolve. So, and Barbara studied many, many more people. I don't have time to get into it all. But just the point being that Barbara's story is one of study. And she studies many, many people. She reaches out to people. This is where a lot of the action takes place in Barbara's story, is not only that she studies their work, but she reaches out to them and wants to get connected with them and wants to be a co-creator of the evolution of humanity with them. So that's Barbara in a nutshell. And then for me, let me tell you about my own study of conscious evolution. And I had a number of inspirational experiences in my life that guided me in the world. And looking back, I realized that every experience that I had, whether or not it was profound, but usually the really profound ones, always left me with the question, well, what's next? What do I do with this experience? And actually, I realize now it was the evolutionary impulse that was guiding me to ask the question and then take action on the next step. So to have a very profound experience in life, to get something from that, and then to say, well, what do I do with that experience? And then to take action on it, that's all happens because of the evolutionary impulse. So my own study of conscious evolution really has been a merger, for the most part, of spirituality and psychology. And there are other things in there too, but I would say the big ones are spirituality and psychology. And in particular, have found resonance in the work of the psychologist Erik Erikson. He is the creator of the human developmental framework called the 8 Stages of Man. And I don't have time to get into it in great detail, but basically Erikson's work in these 8 stages that he identified, at each stage of life, we're presented with a developmental crisis. So from infancy to old age and all the stages in between, we are presented with a developmental crisis. And how we navigate that crisis determines whether we, in essence, are evolving or devolving. It sounds familiar, right? His work had a very profound effect on me. And just to give you a really quick example of that, the stage of middle adulthood, where a lot of us start to think about, well, how can we contribute to co-creating a better world? How do we reinvent ourselves? Erikson said that the crisis is one of stagnation versus generativity. So a lot of us come to this time in our lives where what we've done in the past doesn't work for us anymore. The old career doesn't nurture us anymore. The work we had done before We may have loved it at one point, but now we don't feel it's contributing anymore. And if we continue going down that road and just play it safe, we risk stagnating. On the flip side, if we explore what we could do to contribute, we become generative. And we not only nurture ourselves, but we nurture others by doing that. So that's a really simple example of one of the stages. Another person who influenced me is psychologist Carl Rogers, who was among the founders of the humanistic approach, or what was called the client-centered approach to therapy. So versus the analytical approach to therapy. So those are some of my influences, and I wouldn't have necessarily called them contributors to my study of conscious evolution, but really they have been. And now that I'm familiar with this as a field of study, I consider them to be evolutionaries. So importantly, with that study, I merged practical action, as I mentioned earlier. So we have study with action, or we have study and practice, right? So merging my spirituality and psychology with practical action is where the rubber meets the road. So this action is often experimentation for me. Like, I am my own laboratory. So I experiment with how I do things. I experiment with how I show up. I experiment with my intentions. And nudged by the evolutionary impulse, I put my learning, my beliefs, and my theories into practice. So to give you an example of that, I worked for a long time in the typical corporate world. Corporate America. I worked for some very large companies, and many of you will be familiar with this because you've had these experiences too. To work in very hierarchical organizations, operate very mechanically. And one of my experiments was once I got to a point in my career where I was managing people, where I was leading people, one of my experiments was to show up as a humanistic manager. To be informed by a set of human values, first and foremost, over operational values. To really truly regard everyone on the team as first and foremost a person, before being vessels who just simply do tasks. That every time I put the person first, above their role, and they understood that, and they experienced it, and they felt safe in that, I always had success as a manager. And it had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with how I treated people and how they received it, and then how they treated me. So as you continue to pay attention to your evolutionary impulse, informed by your study and practice of conscious evolution, I'd invite you to acquaint yourself more deeply with your own inherent genius. We all have it. It's the thing that you do really without it feeling like it's work. It's the thing that flows for you. For me, it's communication. I've always felt very natural presenting to people. I've always have loved writing and producing content, and it's always been with me regardless of what role I've had. And it's always helped me to become better at what it is that I was doing functionally. So acquaint yourself more deeply with your inherent genius. And then sensitize your awareness of what sector or sectors of society you are being called to serve. So in Conscious Evolution, Barbara writes about the different sectors of society, which she calls the wheel of co-creation. So these include things like science, spirituality, the arts, medicine, economics, education, the environment, governance and health, and then infrastructure. So where are you being called to serve? And sensitize your awareness to what sector or the intersection of sectors of society where you're being called to show up. And then this is the thing I really appreciated about working with Barbara as well, is that she would say, be specific. And when we're speaking from a visionary level, we can tend to be overly general. And if we say, I want to work for world peace, that's great, but that doesn't tell me the specific area where you want to do it, or how it's going to happen, or what you see, where you see the pieces coming together. So Barbara was very clear about being specific and encouraging that in people. So I would say state clearly the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how. Right? So state clearly who you want to work with and who you want to serve. And also be just as clear about who you don't want to work with. State clearly what you want to accomplish, what you love to do, as well as what you don't want to do. State clearly where you want to serve, literally in what geographic region, and also through what medium, whether it's in person or online or some blend of the two. State clearly when you want to commence and when you see the fruits of your labor manifesting. So it may not be right for you to dive in today or even tomorrow. Maybe you need to get some other things in order before you can go forward with gusto. So be clear about that. State clearly why you desire to do the work and for what purpose. And then state clearly how, even at a high level, you see the work getting done. So this is like identifying the tools, the processes, the techniques, and the other expertise that you need in order to implement what you desire to do and how you desire to show up. So it doesn't mean that the plan has to follow exactly what you write down on paper, but it does help to have a plan. And then as time goes on, you can adjust that. But the point is to be specific in the who, the what, the where, the why, and the how. And think about how you want to join genius with others, because we are exponentially more powerful working together than we are working solo. So with that, my wish and my intention, my prayer for you is to join genius, to continue to follow your evolutionary impulse and trust it, and then trust the impulse in others. And whomever you are led to work with and however they show up for you and vice versa, be open to following the process. And know that I'm holding you in my heart, and I trust you hold me in yours as we all go forward together to do this work of conscious evolution. So thank you so much.